Hi there, welcome to the Students of the Word podcast. I'm Logan Peters, and we're here at the Memphis School of Preaching. We're here at the studio at the Memphis School of Preaching. We're happy that you could join us today, and while we continue our discussion in the book of Hebrews. And today we want to specifically look at the topic of apostasy. Now, apostasy can cause a soul to be lost, but what I want us to talk about at this point is, what is the danger of apostasy?
The danger of apostasy is eternal condemnation. Mm-hmm. For someone to leave the faith, for a group or a church to leave the faith willingly, is a condemning and eternal damning issue. Mm-hmm. So that is the danger. That is the ultimate and eternal danger of apostasy.
Yes. The ultimate danger is the danger with your soul and God. But it is so important that we see the prior danger. So before God brings the judgment, here is what happened. The danger of apostatizing. And it is so dangerous because apostasy happens in stages. It talks about the drifting, talks about the root of bitterness. So it's a stage process. And it so happens that while it happens, you don't generally see it as sudden, so you attack it and curb it before it actually takes place. Mm-hmm. Drifting is the example that the writer gives with a ship. So a ship is at the harbor, but it's not anchored. And the waves come and just bounce. It just bounces and bounces little by little. Mm-hmm. And it eases away. And before long, it is way out, where it cannot be harnessed.
Yes, sir. And so in the context here in the book of Hebrews, the Hebrews writer is trying to give admonition to those Hebrew Christians that are trying to go back to the Mosaic law. They're trying to backslide back into kind of what they were familiar with and go back into that something that's not as great as the new covenant.
Yes.
Juan, can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, whenever we look at the book of Hebrews, we see a few main ideas in chapter 1 with the power of Christ and showing how his covenant is better because of his power. Whenever we apostatize, well, we make that power in vain. We're acting like we don't care about it.
Right.
We see then in chapter 2 how Christ came to be a sacrifice to activate that covenant. We see in Matthew 26 and 27, this is my blood before the new covenant, which would be like kind of a throwback to Moses whenever he slayed the lamb for the covenant. He said, this is the blood of this covenant.
Right.
And so we make that sacrifice vain as well. And in the wilderness, well, they had that heart of unbelief. They did not trust in God. And so whenever we apostatize, we don't trust in God, and we create that heart of unbelief. And it can happen to anyone. It says 3 times in just 2 chapters, lest any of you fall. And so we see it can happen to anyone, and we lose a lot of promises throughout it. For example, the promise of a greater rest. Chapter 4 deals with a rest that they couldn't receive, which is the same kind of rest that God had whenever he ceased from all his creation.
Right. And we can see that people do slip. People do apostatize. People do go back to their old ways of life. And that's the idea for Christians is to hold on to that faith, to grasp it so tightly that you're never going to let go. And we keep studying and we keep learning about the love of God and learning his word and his rules and his guidance, so that way we can hold on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if I
sorry, you can
yeah,
go.
if I could add something, these Hebrew Christians here that the writer is admonishing, of course, in the context, we know they are wanting to go back to the old covenant, and it's evident whenever we look at like Hebrews 10 there's certain ways that people can apostatize that are very evident, right? It's like they're not at worship, or they're 1 Corinthians chapter 5, right?
Yes.
The man that was living in adultery with his stepmother.
Yes.
And there's certain things that are evident, and it's like, okay, this is obvious, an obvious thing of apostasy. But there really are people out there who are there every Wednesday at church, there every Sunday, but their heart is far from God. And that is an extreme danger of apostasy, because it's from the outside, they look righteous, like the Pharisees.
Right.
In vain do they worship me, right? Their hearts are far from God, but they are going through the motions.
But what causes that is that man begins to think of himself higher than he is. He begins to lean on his own understanding, and we're told, we're warned against that in Proverbs 1 and verse 7. And then if one turns away from the instruction of God and turns to his own mind, he's in danger of forming a heart of opinion and forming a heart of I know better, and forming a heart of, well, God's not really there for me. And we see that in 2 John 1, 9 through 11.
Yes.
So we see that it's so easy to slip, not even consciously slipping. And that's why we're told to continue to study in 2 Timothy, because there's that danger. There's a danger of not continuing to hold on. And that's what I love about Hebrews, is that he continues, he hits that point so hard to hold on, to keep doing the things that you need to do in order to remain faithful and remain in the faith.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the way to avoid that is to study the Word. He mentions that, as a matter of fact, in chapter 3, I think, whenever he's talking about, chapter 4, seeing that we have a great high priest. Verse 12, for the Word of God is quick and powerful. It's alive and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even, look at this, it helps us in all our manners of life. The dividing asunder of soul and spirit, it helps us in our spiritual life. And it also cuts through the joints and the marrow, which would be our physical life. And it's a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. It helps us with our mental life. We need to study this word, how you were saying. James says, be a doer of the word, not a hearer only. Don't give time for temptation. Don't give time to even think about it, because all you're doing is thinking about improving in the Word of God. And this is our mirror. And because of that, we are able to examine ourselves. And if we're not living up to that expectation, we can go boldly into the throne of grace and mercy and receive that from God, because we have a high priest that knows what it feels like to be human.
And it's amazing how the more you study, the more you stay in the Word, and the more if you put yourself in that place as those Hebrew Christians, and you take what the Hebrews writer wrote and you apply it to yourself, and you stay in the Scriptures, and you stay in your prayer life, you stay with God, it's amazing to see how your life not only continues to change, but to how much more respect and more love you have for others, and how just more joyful you are, because we can go boldly one day into the judgment, and go and be with God forever.
And the great thing about it is, as the psalmist would say, the word of the Lord endureth forever. So it'll always never change. Never changes.
Well, that's all the time we have today. We thank you so much for being with us for this podcast and continuing our study with Hebrews. We hope to see you again next time. Thanks.